Led by the Los Angeles County Commission on Human Relations, this focus represents an important component of bringing more public awareness and solutions to the issue. We're pleased to begin our program today with a brief taped comment from LA County Supervisor Catherine Barger.
COVID-19 doesn't discriminate, and neither will we. Since the pandemic began, hate crimes against Asian communities have skyrocketed. Blame for the virus has been unfairly placed on our Asian neighbors. Not only are they not at fault for this pandemic, they have been a force for help and for hope. I have witnessed incredible generosity from our Asian communities across Los Angeles County. They've raised funds to provide masks, gloves, hand sanitizer, and other needed supplies for our frontline workers to protect against this virus. Our Asian communities have shown up for all of us, and it's time that we stand up for them. All of us can combat hate by protecting our neighbors and using our voices. Make a point to look out for the well-being of elderlies, especially making sure they get to their destination safely. Continue to support your local Asian-owned businesses, which have been deeply impacted by this pandemic. If you witness a hate crime, call 211 to report it. The Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors has dedicated funding to further our LA versus Hate initiative. It's never been us versus them. It's all of us against hate. To our Asian communities, I stand with you. A Chinese proverb says, better to light a candle than to curse the darkness. May each of us commit to be part of the solution and to be the light.
So our speakers today each bring years of hands-on experience to this topic, and it's a great honor to have them with us. To our media friends, please think of questions as our presenters are speaking. You can post them in chat, and when our presenters have both finished, I'll either read your questions or call upon you to ask our presenters yourself. Please address any chat you do post to everyone and not specifically as a direct message to Maymay or me. Also, I'd like to ask our media audience to log. I know Maymay wrote something, but if you're not looking in the chat, you may miss this. Please register your name and contact information there, so we'll make sure we have a record of your attendance. Our first presenter today is Louis Friedberg. Currently Director of California Media Collaborative, Louis led EdSource as Executive Director from July of 2011, for 11 years almost, to April of 2021. For more than 2 decades, Friedberg has analyzed and reported on local, state, and national education policy. Before going to EdSource, Friedberg was a founding director of California Watch at the Center for Investigative Reporting. He spent 15 years at the San Francisco Chronicle, where he was an award-winning education reporter, Washington correspondent, columnist, and member of the editorial board. He has a PhD in social anthropology from UC Berkeley and a BA in child development from Yale University. Louis, the microphone is yours.
Well, good morning, everyone, and just wanted to say how pleased I am to be with you on this panel. I can't think of a more important topic to be dealing with at this time of, I don't know, turmoil and change in the country at large. I would just say California should be further ahead than it is. The fact that hate crimes are going up in California is incredibly distressing. Not only going up, but it's at its highest levels in many years. We should be the model for how to get along in California. The familiar refrain memorialized by Rodney King. I think many communities are getting it right. I think the statistics only tell you give you a little piece of the picture. But in general, we should be much further ahead. And I'll just mention that I grew up in South Africa, and so saw racial bigotry hatred at its worst. And I grew up in a completely segregated society. California is really the polar opposite in most cases. I will just say one of the things that gives me the privilege of growing up in South Africa is I also, as a journalist, was privileged to see Nelson Mandela cast his vote in 1994 and signaling the end of apartheid. So change, I always say if apartheid could be ended in South Africa, we should be able to figure out how to get over some of the racial and ethnic and other divisions that exist in California. So that's just a little preamble to this topic. And also I just want to express my appreciation to Senator Huff. I don't know if that's a lifetime honorific that you enjoy in California. I hope so. But also so important to reach out across the political divides, which is not happening enough in California and nationally, I would say, particularly nationally. So I think this initiative, and especially coming from Senator Huff and Meme Huff, is so important in terms of the discussion. I'd also just say I noticed that this event has also been underwritten by the State Library. Also unusual that the State Library in California taking such a proactive role on issues like this at a time when books are being banned or restricted for use across the country, often for really no reason, which really threaten free speech and so on. So that was also something that I thought was important to note. Of course, schools are the key, or a key. I mean, it all starts with the parents. And, we all know that so much of our attitudes, racial or others, are rooted in family backgrounds. And so, kids come to school with certain attitudes, and schools present an opportunity to help kids get a better understanding of who their neighbors are, who their friends are in California. And, one of the things that I think is little known is that, California is trying to do the right thing in many of these areas. So, for example, the law in California requires helping students to respect their peers, to be racially tolerant, ethnically tolerant in terms of gender and sexual identification and so on. This is required in the credentialing process. And I'll just give you a couple of examples. And I know the other panelists, will also be addressing some of these issues. But there are these teacher performance expectations. For beginning teachers are expected to promote students' social emotional growth, to make sure that they use positive interventions and supports, and so that each student is treated fairly and respectfully by adult peers. They're also supposed to create learning environments that encourage positive interactions among students, reflect diversity and multiple perspectives, and are culturally responsible. They're also supposed to enable all students to learn and recognize, and I'm reading from these performance, they're called TPEs, teacher performance evaluations, and appropriately address instances of intolerance and harassment among students, such as bullying, racism, and sexism. This is the law in California. This is not optional. This is actually required by law. And also, teachers are expected to be able to establish and maintain clear expectations for positive classroom behavior. And I will also say in the law, and this is again what's expected when you get your credential in California, is that teachers themselves are supposed to recognize their own values and look at their own implicit and explicit biases. And this whole issue of implicit bias has become so controversial and attacked by many, I would say, on the hard right, and linked with critical race theory and so on. But, teachers are expected to look at the ways in which their own biases, and I'm just reading from the expectations here, performance expectations, that they are expected to look at how these biases may positively and negatively affect teaching and learning, and work to mitigate any negative impact on the teaching and learning of students. So, that is one marker. California also passed a law about 10 years ago called Seth's Law. And I concede that these laws get passed, and then to what extent are they, and I'm sure Senator Huff is very aware of this, to what extent are they implemented? To what extent are we tracking to see how they are being implemented? I think that is a major challenge. But this was a law passed 10 years ago, which required public schools in California to update their anti-bullying policies and programs and focus on protecting students who are bullied based on their actual or perceived sexual orientation and gender identity, gender expression, as well as the race, ethnicity, nationality, gender, disability, and religion. These all, on the face of it, seem like reasonable laws, but they have become so incredibly, these issues that the law is supposed to address have been highly controversial, especially around the issue of gender and sexual orientation. And so, I think what is somehow missed in a lot of the controversies going on right now is that when school districts are trying actually to follow the law, they are running into, a quagmire of opposition and dissent. Often, or at least in some cases, because the implementation, there is, that's where we start falling down, is in the implementation. And unfortunately, very often, it's easy to find kind of extreme cases of a teacher or a school that may not have implemented these in the spirit in which they are intended. And I'll just give you one example. I'm sure most of you on this call, on this conversation, remember the controversy about ethnic studies in California. I think a well-intentioned effort to make sure that, young people in California know the history of not only their own groups, but other groups. And intended to help engender more tolerance and consistent with these guidelines and expectations for teachers. But unfortunately, there was a model curriculum that was developed that, was filled with jargon, major problems with that ethnic studies model curriculum. One of the issues was that, and one of the things we've seen recently is a rise of anti-Semitism in California and nationally. But this draft curriculum barely mentioned anti-Semitism. It included something called the BDS, this Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions Initiative, which is highly controversial, even amongst, many people who are supportive of Israel, and certainly within the Jewish community. But, this curriculum was attempting to, basically endorsed that approach. And so, the state then did have to backtrack on this. Linda Darling-Hammond, who was president of the State Board of Education, and Governor Newsom and Tony Thurmond, the state superintendent, all said, no, we needed to revise this. And Linda Darling-Hammond one of the most influential people in shaping education policy in California right now, said a model curriculum should be accurate, free of bias, appropriate for all learners in our diverse state, and aligned with Governor Newsom's vision of a California for all. I mean, these sound eminently reasonable. I would say after a lot of revisions, I think they got it right, that they came up with a model curriculum that I think most people could accept. There's always going to be people who are unhappy. And that is one of the challenges in California with such a diverse set of communities. To make sure everyone is represented to everyone's satisfaction is extremely difficult. But I was impressed with that effort. They went back to the drawing board and came up with a curriculum that, as I say, I think was supported by certainly a lot of the critics. So I would just also say briefly, and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues, that there are lots of resources that are available to teachers and schools. And this is not, schools don't have to invent strategies for helping kids overcome biases. There's the Facing History in Ourselves that started with really focusing on the Holocaust, but they've really broadened that. Teaching Tolerance. There's another, actually a good friend of mine, Judith Pace from the University of San Francisco, as a whole, written a book and strategies for teaching controversial issues. We can talk a little bit more about that if there are questions about, how does one teach some of these difficult issues in a way that doesn't raise red flags, doesn't have protests, trigger protests at school board meetings and so on. But there are resources and this can be done. But too often, I think there's either a misunderstanding, a distortion of what's going on, or, and in a much smaller number of cases, I would say a misapplication or an extreme application of some of these principles that are entrenched in state law. So, Bob, if we can just leave it at that, and I'm happy to we'll come back to any other questions.
Okay, great. Thank you, Louis, for your comments, and I'm sure we'll have some questions later on. It is such a thorny issue, and as you say, the resources are out there, but how do we get those from academia to the white papers and get them actually implemented? And even when we do it, we don't always get it right the first time. Sometimes we got to go back and revisit it. But thank you for your comments. Our next speaker is the Honorable Walter Allen III. Walt Allen's a 46-year law enforcement veteran who started his career in, at least nearby to me, city of Chino, where he's a police officer too and a SWAT team member. Second, I need to increase this a little bit. He also served as special agent, eventually as assistant chief for the Department of Justice, Bureau of Narcotic Enforcement. In 2003, Walt was appointed by former Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger as the director of the California's Youth Offender Correctional System, the California Youth Authority. Walt then served as the governor's assistant secretary of the Office of Correctional Safety, OCS, for the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation in 2005. After retiring in 2006, Governor Schwarzenegger appointed Walt to the Post Commission, where he served as a post commissioner. And you may be like me, you say, what does that stand for? Post stands for the Police Officer Standards and Training. He did that for the next 4 years. Walt also returned to the work environment in 2007 as a deputy commissioner for the Board of Parole Hearings, where he served for the next 6 years. After retiring very briefly for a second time, Walt returned to work once again in 2014 as a director of the Rio Hondo Police Academy at Rio Hondo College in Whittier, California, overseeing police academy training for newly hired police recruits from law enforcement agencies throughout Southern California. Walt still serves in this capacity. He is also the mayor pro tem for the city of Covina, marking his 23rd year as a council member for the Covina City Council and has served as the mayor 4 different times. Walt's a former chair and current member of the League of California Cities Public Safety Committee and recently served as a member of the League of California Cities Board of Directors. Walt's also the current president of the League of California Cities African American Caucus. In 2019, he completed a 3-year term as the chair of the Emanate Health Board of Directors, which manages 4 not-for-profit hospitals and continues as a board member of that organization. Additionally, Walt serves as a member of the Cal Poly Pomona University Philanthropic Board of Directors and as a member of the board of the directors of the Cal Poly Pomona University Alumni Association. Walt also serves as a member of the Etty Lee Youth and Family Services Board of Directors and recently served as the president of the California Police Academy Directors Association. Walt holds a bachelor's degree in urban planning from Cal Poly Pomona University, a Master of Science degree in law enforcement executive leadership from California Southern University, and an honorary doctorate degree in humane letters from Promise Christian University. Walt is also a graduate of the Rio Hondo Police Academy, class number 36, the California Department of Justice Special Agent Academy, and the 172nd session of the FBI National Academy. Walt, I want to ask you what you're doing in your spare time because I don't think you have any.
I'm actually pretty embarrassed for you to read that.
It was labeled your short bio, so I'd hate to hear the long one.
It's a pleasure to be with everyone this morning. And I think it's important that I start with the fact that I grew up in Oakland, California in the 50s. And I grew up in the era of the evolution of the Black Panther Party, Stokely Carmichael, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and I grew up in a predominantly Black community in East Oakland and ventured down to Cal Poly Pomona to get my college education. There are 2 things that I wanted to chat about this morning, and one was, and I want to say right out of the gate, from my perspective as a director of a police academy, I've seen the evolution of law enforcement training since 1976 when I graduated from Rio Hondo myself, to where we're at now. And I will have to say that from my perspective, having been in the business for 46 years now, there have been some tremendous improvements, particularly in recent years. And that is based upon the efforts of President Obama in 2014, where he enacted a task force on the issues of enhancing law enforcement nationally. From that program, or the task force that President Obama formulated with really great subject matter experts nationally, there has been tremendous movement to really legitimize law enforcement, particularly in those communities that have a large amount of people of color. Here at Rio Hondo, when I took over the academy as its director 9 years ago, we wanted to really work on building a program that would help police officers operate more efficiently in the community in terms of police and law enforcement legitimacy. And I based my mode of operation upon President Obama's 21st Century Policing Report. And that encompasses building trust and legitimacy, policy and oversight, community policing in terms of crime reduction, training and education, and more importantly, the concepts of procedural justice, and that's based upon fair and impartial policing, transparency, and communication, as well as principled policing concepts and officer wellness and safety. Most importantly, the process we move towards here at the Academy, and I think many of our California-based police academies are using the same mode of operation. The attitude we have here is that we're producing guardians of society. Yes, we provide them warrior skills. We show them how to use warrior tools like the firearm and whatnot. But we're really producing guardians who are playing a much more complex role than they have in past years. And I might add that the 21st century task force regarding task force on policing really deals with the catalyst for that was Ferguson, Missouri, and a number of other issues, to backtrack on that. But what we try to do is provide guardianship education with a tremendous amount of cultural diversity training, principal policing, and procedural justice training as well. And here again, I think we've had some pretty good success. We provide well over 100 hours of cultural diversity training. This does not include the fact that we have brought a number of speakers into the Academy to speak with the cadets. I had representatives from Black Lives Matter actually speak with our cadets about their perspective, but the caveat is that our cadets were allowed to ask them questions and challenge them on concepts that they had about policing. All in all, it's been a wonderful experience serving at the Academy that I graduated from. And from my perspective, one of the other very important aspects of 21st century policing is recruitment and selection of individuals that mirror the communities that they're going to be policing. And I think there's been a lot of headway, particularly here in Los Angeles County. About 80% of the recruits we have here that come through Rio Hondo Police Academy every session are about 80% of our academy population. And it's important to understand that the Post Commission has done quite a bit long before Ferguson and long before some of the issues we've had with policing incidents nationally, that the Post Commission has moved quite rapidly towards producing academy curriculum that measures up to what we should be doing in our communities, particularly our communities of color statewide. From my perspective, one of the major challenges we have now is recruitment because of some of the aspects that problems that have happened nationally. Many agencies in California, particularly in Los Angeles County, are having difficulties in recruitment. And I would say that one out of every 100 candidates are hired as police officers. And it's a very stringent process. The Post Commission has a very, very detailed process and a lot of requirements for police officers for someone to qualify as a police officer. Even more so, once they're hired, we have a process where we focus in on the character as well as the abilities of the recruit. When a recruit gets hired here in California, they're going to have to go through a written exam process, an oral board, a physical agility, a detailed background investigation, a polygraph exam, a psychological exam, a medical exam, and a chief sorrel before they even get to our front door. And once they get here, they're going to spend approximately 6 months of their lives here at Rio Hondo Police Academy, and they're going to be bombarded with about 41 different learning domains. I would say that the concept of procedural justice it's threaded through all of those learning domains from the moment they come through our doors. And those concepts deal with voice, neutrality, and respect, and last but not least, trustworthiness. Those concepts are the basic concepts for procedural justice, and that is laced in our academy, and also it is laced in the other 41 police academies that operate in the state of California. I think that there's been tremendous progress made in terms of police officer training. I think we still have a long way to go. There was a recent assembly bill that was passed that will go into effect in a couple of years, and that was Assembly Bill 89, which deals with the requirement for a police-related degree. That degree process is still being worked out with a special panel of educators and the post commission along with the legislature to come up with a program where we have people that have a higher degree of education that come through the police academy process. I have some concern, a little bit of concern about that, because right now we have a real serious recruitment and retention problem in California, and I'm a little concerned about the fact that this process may compound the already difficult time we're having finding qualified police officers to enter into the profession. But all in all, I think that it's important that we do have recruits that have great critical thinking skills, which is an important aspect of policing. And if you have more education, you're probably going to do a much better job when it comes to operating in the field and dealing with the public on a day-to-day basis. I think that it is important that we continue to do all we can in law enforcement to establish a direct connect with our communities in terms of justifying our existence. Police legitimacy is a critical concern for many of our communities, and one way to address that is having qualified police officers working in our communities and having those core values that are important to operating in the police environment. Those core values that connect us with the community must start from the top and work its all the way and be carried out throughout the entire police agency. I didn't have any specific issues of concern about police officer training, because I think California is, light years ahead of all the other states in the union that provide police training. We've always had great subject matter experts helping us with our post curriculum for our academies, and we continue to do all we can to advance issues that connect us with the community, which deals with procedural justice and cultural diversity issues. And at this time, I'm pretty much finished with my comments, and I'm looking forward to some of the questions that I'll receive from our folks that are visiting us, Bob. But I do want to say one other thing. One of the other aspects of the academy is our police officers understanding the issues associated with hate crime, and having a great understanding that it is an obligation of all police officers here in the state of California to take hate crime reporting very seriously, and all of our students have a great understanding of the issues that relate to hate crimes and the requirements that they have in reporting hate crimes to the Department of Justice, and all of the aspects of the laws associated with hate crime reporting.
Okay, well, thank you for your comments. Before we open it up to questions from the audience, I just want to build on what you were just talking about, the reporting. I've heard different things. You know, some law enforcement say that they don't like to report because hate crime is a federal issue, and that triggers a whole different set of responses. I believe in LA County, they report hate incidents, which is you have to prove bias to make it a hate crime or prove intent. And so, I mean, how do your officers that you train differentiate between a hate incident? How do you get them to report that? And you know, do you get feedback from cadets that have come through your program and come back and say, "Oh man, the real world is much worse," or "Oh, your training really helped me in this particular instance"? Just if you could share your thoughts on that a little bit.
Well, you know, we train a total of, well, we train more than 50 different police agencies that send their recruits here. And we tell them about the responsibilities that they have to report the hate crimes, but understand this: each of these recruits are going to be going to different departments, and the departments have different policies on how they're going to carry out the obligation that they have regarding reporting hate crimes. In regards to feedback, one of the things that we do here at Rio Hondo, when a recruit leaves here after 6 months of training, they're going to go into another 6-month training program, which is entitled the Field Officer Training Program. And they're going to be assigned field training officers when they leave here for a period of time. And there's 3 different phases that they're going to go through. What we have done on a routine basis is we bring the recruit training officers, we invite them to come to the academy, and we talk to them about what we're doing right, that's matching up with their concerns might be in the field in terms of enforcing the law. And we also talk to them about some of the new laws or policies that they may not be aware of, because we want a fluid transition from the academy into the field officer training program. And the days of a recruit leaving the academy and going into a field training officer program, and that field training officer telling them, forget everything you've learned about that you learned in the academy. This is the way it really is. Those days are disappearing because the post commission is either retraining the recruit training officers or advising the newly trained recruit training officers that they have an obligation to carry out some of the new important factors in terms of policing, such as procedural justice and also de-escalation procedures that we're using in the field. They're obligated to carry that out at their department. And here again, you know, here in Los Angeles County, we have over 35 different police agencies. Each police agency has a set of policies and procedures, and sometimes they're not exactly aligned with other departments. But our role is to make sure that we provide a police officer when they leave this academy that's going to have all the tools that is necessary to perform properly in the field. And this goes for interrelationships with the public, be it a person that has committed a crime, are a citizen that they come in contact with. And we know for a fact that there are over 300 million police contacts, actually more than that, each year in the United States. And most of them don't involve the use of force. However, we think it's important that when they leave here, they have the verbal skills, the communication skills, and the de-escalation skills to effectively operate in their communities.
Great. Well, thank you for that, Walt. I have a question in the chat for Lewis from Lauren Morrison. Given your rich combined background in education and reporting, can you reflect on the role of the media in helping to address the hate crimes and how you think the media could improve on current practices? And if you're speaking, unmute your mic.
Thank you. Yeah, a very good question and an important one, because I think it's obvious that the media do play a key role in shaping narratives and perceptions around these issues. And I mean, stating the obvious, unfortunately, too much reporting focuses on extreme incidents when they occur, and a lot less on the work that is being done to overcome some of these hostilities, tensions, resentments, and racism that still exists. And one of the challenges is that what lies behind a lot of these hate crimes. I mean, why does somebody have a bigoted or a racist view of people or the world? It's a result of many, many factors. And unfortunately, in general, the media doesn't lend itself to dealing with those kinds of complexities. The pressures are to distill something into a few hundred words or a short 1 or 2 minute, or if you're lucky, 3-minute clip on television. And so this is a challenge. I mean, even for a well-intentioned reporter, you're just so limited in the kind of space and time that you have to report on these issues. So, one of the things I think there needs to be more of a, how shall I say, more communication between people who are studying these issues, people in academia, who tend often to, I would say, look at things in a too detailed and complex fashion. But there needs to be more dialogue between the journalists and people who really understand the complexity and all the different factors that contribute to hate crimes and bigotry in the society. But it's a tough challenge. And particularly now when we have media broken down into all these different islands, niches, people speaking to themselves and amplifying attitudes that already exist or they already hold, it's a real challenge.
Well, thank you. And I know you carry a lot of perspective from a journalist standpoint, because I remember reading, in fact, I read an editorial yours posted just recently, but over the years, you've weighed in on some pretty important issues. I have a question for both of you, and let me start by making a few comments. So, Lewis, you talked about how the parents have a responsibility with their children to raise them up. And of course, parents have their own biases and they tend to transmit them to the next generation. And the schools tend to they have to take whatever lump of clay they get and try to mold it into a responsible human being I would say in concert with parents. It's not always an easy job. Some parents have different ideas about how to raise their children, and that, is an ongoing issue. But for the most part, our educational system moves them in some socially correct manner and nudges them more in a direction. And when they don't do a good job of that, then the police get involved, so we see the whole continuum here. For each of you and your perspectives from education and in law enforcement, for you all, what would you say is the biggest challenge to addressing the increase in hate? It's always been with us. Louis, as you talked about it, it started with the Holocaust, and from then on, working and creating programs and everything. But what's the biggest challenge that education faces and law enforcement faces to get our arms around this and actually lower the number of incidents and create a more loving, less biased, less prejudiced society? We start with Walt and finish with Louis.
Well, naturally, I think police departments really making efforts to engage in good, solid community policing is the first step to establishing a good relationship with the community. And through legitimacy with the community, citizens will be more free to communicate with the police agencies regarding issues they're having with racism in the community, and work in concert with the community to help root out some of those type of problems.
Very good. Thank you. And Louis, your comments?
I would just say, and I wanted to just also piggyback off what Walt was saying. One of the things I attended was I think right before the pandemic, was a police academy in Santa Rosa. And I sat in on some sessions on implicit bias. I mean, it's quite a big chunk of the training that these officers get. And it was right after the George Floyd tragedy. And well, I was totally taken aback that police were getting this kind of training, and it was very upfront. I mean, what can I say? It wasn't trying, and they were getting people to participate in the discussion. And I think most people wouldn't know that police cadets are getting this kind of training.
Right. I have to say that when the representatives from Black Lives Matter attended a community panel, when they left, this was the comment that they made. We think it's fantastic what you're doing. We didn't know this, but all police are racist. And that was the comment on the way out the door. We love what you're doing, but there's still tremendous problems out there. And I says, well, what we're trying to do is eliminate some of the false perceptions. And we want you to know that we are doing our best to send people into the field that are going to have a direct connect with citizens when they're out there. And I have to tell you, it's a balancing act. Because police officers dealing with serious crime on a regular basis, they can become jaded. And that's why in the academy, we have an officer wellness piece that we think is critical, because the psychological well-being of a police officer is routinely in jeopardy in terms of being jaded, in terms of having mental health issues, because of the difficulties of the job. So that's another piece. As a matter of fact, officer wellness is going to become a major component of police academy training in the very near future. Right now, the Post Commission has assembled nationally recognized subject matter experts to deal with that component. We think that's a very important component to police academy training, because It's important. A lot of departments have the peer counseling services and whatnot, but even the police agencies, many of the police agencies realize that the officer wellness piece is a critical piece in terms of an officer functioning properly in the field. And
what
we think that's an important component.
Well, one of the reasons I raised this, because just like in education, I mean, we do not have to start from scratch here. California is already doing a lot of things that need to be done, like building into the teacher credentialing requirements to promote tolerance, to help kids appreciate being in a community of diverse communities in California. But how do we go beyond that? Because I understand, for example, with the police academies, that there was a feeling of people who were giving the sessions that it wasn't enough. You need to reinforce it. You are not going to overcome somebody's implicit biases or explicit biases in 1 or 2 sessions, and that isn't really built in sufficiently. And also with the existing police officers, not just with the new cadets. Similarly, at the education end of it, how do we make sure that teachers are actually, one, doing what the spirit of the law and the letter of the law intends, and are also get continuing support in doing so? I'd say the other side of it is that school boards themselves have to support their teachers, and too often they don't. The school boards are acting at odds with their teachers. I'll just mention, there was this Yorba Linda school district just recently. They banned critical race theory and everything else. And Cal State Fullerton, which places teachers in the district, trains teachers, they said, we can't put teachers in your district anymore because we are training them to do things that the law requires, number one, and that you've just outlawed. So there needs to be education in terms of school boards in some of these districts about, one, what the law requires, and not sort of, acting, I would say, in an emotional and a counterproductive fashion. Because I'll tell you, the other thing we are seeing is that teachers are afraid to raise any of these issues because they might, get, called out or put on websites and so on. So we do have a problem right now that in too many places in California, teachers are feeling intimidated as in terms of how to do things that they are expected to do. And I think any reasonable person would encourage them to do.
Well, and I find it interesting that both the law enforcement angle and the education angle are having recruiting issues, and teachers and police are put in tough spots because society is requiring them to do certain things, and they're getting pushback from various sides. I have one last question for Walt that came in from the chat. Does the training process for police encourage collaboration between the various law enforcement agencies in terms of addressing hate crimes? Got a quick comment on that, Walt?
Yes, I can only speak in terms of what's happening in the police academy in regards to interrelationships between the agencies. I know that when there's a serious hate crime of one type, that are a number of different types that if it's multi-jurisdictional, sure, the agencies are going to cooperate with each other. But in terms of my knowledge of what is happening in terms of cooperation amongst the agencies, I'm not aware of what might be happening with that aspect of the hate crime investigation resources that agencies might be sharing with one another.
Yeah, I think that's a historic issue. Different agencies have their own jurisdictions, and there's probably not as much as they could learn from each other. But listen,
Bob,
Yes.
can I just make a 30-second
Sure, go ahead.
request to the people on
Yeah.
your call? I'm actually involved in a new initiative, Advancing Education Success. One of the pieces which we are trying to launch is deliberative dialogues. How can we bring people together to move forward in terms of what kids need to succeed? And if there are any districts that you know of, which you would think would be open to trying to bring people together. I'm not sure you'll ever bring the extremes together, but people of goodwill who may have differences as to what the best strategies are to overcome some of these divisions, I'd very much like to hear from you.
Great. Thank you, Louis. Thank you, Walt, for your comments. And to our media audience, when we get the material all together, as is usual, we'll be emailing you a link to today's program, as well as any resources we may have mentioned. You can also find valuable information at our website, actagainst.hate.org. And again, high praise and thanks to Louis and Walt for coming on our program, sharing your real world experiences. I got the hint, the idea that we just scratched the surface. There's a lot more we could have delved into there. But it's our goal to offer to our media audience various leaders in education, law enforcement, business, politics, to wrap our heads around how we can be so enlightened in this day and age and yet lose ground to these heinous and increasing incidents of hate. Our goal is not just to talk about hate, although we do, to raise awareness, but to find real, meaningful, and lasting solutions. As a diverse society, we must aspire to be respectful, compassionate, nonpartisan, and inclusive. The future we're creating today must overcome hate, and we're here at the Act Against Hate Alliance. With your assistance, hope to help lead the way. Be sure to mark your calendar for next month's briefing, which, absent anything I can't see right now, we held on the second Wednesday, which is December 14th at 11 a.m. Thanks for attending. That concludes today's program.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you. Appreciate it, guys.